Have you been speedrunning anything lately?
In the last week, not really. Before that, Breath of the Wild I was doing. But I've been playing Splatoon 2 as well, so like I have not been speedrunning that much.
Or Odyssey at some point? What did you think of that one?
What one?
Mario Odyssey.
Oh, I think it's a good Mario game.
I'm not really sure what I was expecting when I started playing it. I remember I had fond memories of Super Mario 64, so I expected it to be kind of like that. But I think the more I look back on like speedrun videos of Super Mario 64 and like those analysis videos, the more I realized that it was really something completely different altogether. Learning to program, and the more I learned that, especially when I'm trying to just play around and make some simple games, I more realize that program has to be designed. I mean, I think a lot of us separate programming and design as like separate game production, but people who take things like vertical speed conservation and the way that parallel universes work, and those are just like quirks of the code, but they treat them like, just it's a point where like the boundary between the two kind of breaks down a bit.
Yeah, it's like the physics of the game and stuff sort of dictate like how the world can be structured and stuff.
You have to kind of it's not just enough to just like design the mechanics in abstract. You also have to design the low level systems that will allow them to that they're supposed to, and those might end up having side effects of their own, which I feel like really should be taken into account when like the design of the game, like what its mechanics and what its features are, because become features in their own right. I guess it's kind of like a melee. I mean, I guess you could say that Super Mario 64 is kind of like the melee of platformers at this point.
I think some people equate those things.
What makes it so interesting for speedrunning is that the levels, if you compare it with something like Super Mario Odyssey, at least like by modern standards, they're not that big. There's like a strict limit to how big you can make, how big they were able to make the maps at the time, and so they kind of fold over a bit, like vertically and laterally. So you see a lot of like areas that overlap with each other, like opportunities to like wall kick up to an upper floor that you might have to down, because everything's so close together. There are a lot of opportunities for shortcuts.
Right. Yeah, like Womp's Fortress.
Though I feel like if the game is, I feel like the game's appeal now has become something from what it was when it first came out.
Do you mean like the emergent gameplay based on the mechanics leads to a different kind of allure with the game?
When it came out, it was like, the big open 3D game of its day. It was supposed to be like, advanced for the time.
It was.
And that's something I feel like the closest maybe to how that might have felt then would have been to take something like Breath of the Wild now. I remember I remember it's hard to think of it, I think, game the same way someone might think of like Destiny or Grand Theft Auto as an open world game, but I remember when I first started renting the game, though there were stars to collect, I could just take out a shell and just kind of surf all over the place and throw stuff at random and just see how all the stuff bounced off of other things. And
yeah, I mean, open world's sort of like it's just like a term, it's not like a strict thing really.
I think, I mean, a lot of games have stuff like that. Even it feels like.
Are you saying there's not much innovation happening, like with Odyssey compared to Mario 64?
No, if you try to compare it to 64, it's interpreted. Because I mean, it's not exactly the same, right? It's definitely, I think, trying to strike a balance between that kind of game and the kind of game that 3D World was. Like, you have like each world has like its critical path, and then once you complete that critical path and you have to collect the other moons, it kind of changes pace to a kind of a more exploratory game. Or you could like go off every branching path on your way to the end of the critical path and find that you have all the moons you need before you need to go to the next place, and so on.
Yeah, yeah. I did like that the moons didn't take you like out of the level to the beginning of the level. Like you could just grab one and keep going. Whereas with the stars, you're like repeating some of the same movement. This is more speedrunning perspective, but in Mario 64, it's like some things are repeated multiple times because you have to kind of get back to where you were, or like kind of go in the same direction from the same starting point. Whereas in Odyssey, you just keep going.
It's a lot easier to break sequence in 64, though.
Yeah, it is.
I feel like the way that the game was made, you kind of have to wonder what purpose a side somersault or a back somersault was originally supposed to serve. they couldn't really predict because it was so non-linear. They couldn't really predict what path the player was going to take through it. They couldn't really account for everything the player was going to do. So it kind of felt like they were just trying to give the player as many tools as they could, whatever tools that they thought that they might need in any kind of situation.
Yeah, just like a well-rounded amount of different things you could do, and enough freedom to like do them to get over certain things or up certain things.
There's a lot of I feel like those are design choices where I guess they're kind of looking out for a player that might have been in a difficult situation at the time, because there weren't a lot of games like that then, and they were kind of asking a lot of a new player at the time to adapt to. So the health system is fairly generous. You can heal just by walking into coins. And I think the thing I noticed about that is that even though it's generous, I think is that it emphasizes the time, which was like exploring, because you can heal just by moving around for a bit, but you have to kind of strike out into that world and find the coins in order to do that. You can't just stand in place and let your health regenerate or anything like that.
Unless you're in the water, right?
You're in the water.
I do think it was good design for them to make the health only 3 health in Odyssey. I think it's better than 8, but yeah. It
changes, I think, the way play feels. I think for like taking on a final boss with only it makes it easy with only 3 hit points is a lot more tense than with 8 hit points, especially since you need to collect
hearts or whatever.
Right? And yeah, they can use that to very, very carefully modulate how difficult any given encounter is. Much more control over how health is doled out and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think of usually when I think of like Mario 64's difficulty, it's sort of like you either fall off the level or you fall down somewhere that you didn't mean to go. Like if you're in Tick-Tock Clock and you're like up kind of high and then you fuck up. Or if you're in like Rainbow Road and you slip down and you fall off. Or even like Bowser in the Dark World. Or I guess health comes up with like lava, but yeah.
It's usually not that difficult to stay alive as long as there are coins nearby.
Yeah.
Make the games harder now because everybody's used to it.
Wait, are you asking me if they make the games harder now?
I mean, I think that Odyssey was at least... I mean, if I take something like the late game in Super Mario 3D World, that was definitely harder than Super Mario 64.
I actually haven't played 3D World.
Oh, yeah. It's like, It's sort of like they took the whole Mario and 3D thing and kind of went back to the drawing board on it. And it's... get to the end of the level, but it's in 3D. One thing I will give the game is that it kind of throws out level concepts like it's nobody's business. About the late game, I think about like courses like Blast Block, Skyway, or Champions Road. They're mildly traumatizing, I think, when you get to the really late game levels.
I like when they do difficulty, because yeah, I don't know.
Champions Road is maybe the most difficult level that has ever been in any Mario game ever, and that's coming from somebody who is working through Super Mario Bros. 2. Although I haven't really been able to play it lately. There's like a long list of games. One of the ones that somebody suggested was Yuminiki. Oh wait, Problematic.
Problematic, yeah.
I love that game. It's one of my favorites.
Really? That's cool.
I saw your stream of it also.
Yeah.
Interesting game. I think there's a lot to be said for the pace of play, that you're constantly moving from rooms to rooms. Everything is
you have to like figure out what the hell's going on. It's like hard to parse sometimes.
Yeah, the disjointedness of it kind of goes into like a sense of tunnel vision, I think. Speaks to me. I think there's actually like a passage in one of the, like a text passage in the background of one of the levels that's like my life in rooms or something like that.
Yeah, there's like some messages.
No, I think of, I guess the thing that comes to my head is, a period in your life where everything is so disorienting that it feels like you're kind of moving through life and everything is moving around you, but you're not conscious of it all, right? It's just like it's moving past you. Like the world's that way and you're over here and all you can think about is getting to the next room.
I think I immediately found the game like kind of a fond experience with it, because it drops you in and then like you have to figure out what the hell, like how do you make progress in this thing? And it's like you have to like, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what is going on, or like what you're trying to accomplish in a certain place, or where you're trying to get to. I got stuck somewhere my first time ever playing it, but then,
right at the end, I think.
Oh, well, I played it before. I got to a place where like I messed up something and I forgot about the reset button and it was like impossible to get out and I just like got stuck there for like an hour and I was like, I don't know. And then when I played it again, I realized like one of the first rooms teaches you that you can like reset. And then I was like, oh. So when I got back there, it's like, oh, okay. And then I was able to progress. And like I think some of the later parts there's like some it like sometimes just drops you like a certain room might have like a different kind of mechanic thing going on. And it's just a very bizarre experience, but it felt satisfying to like progress through it.
I think about the cross people, those cross characters a lot, you know. The first time you play the game, you don't really know what they are, and I think the instinct you have as like a long time player is just to, like walk up to the thing, see what happens. So then when you touch them, and you know they make that really weird sound, the screen starts shaking.
Yeah, it is like, it's like, it gives you a kind of, it's like you're being attacked or something, but it's just kind of shaking the screen and making noise, and like they're like moving around and stuff.
It's not really attacking you, but you kind of want to back off anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of just spent a lot of time just instinctively avoiding them. You know, just that was enough to make me not want to go near them. And then so when I reached the point where, you know, you have to use them to get through the level, I guess there was like a little light bulb went off in my head, you know, that these are things that being around them hurts you, but you kind of have to life because the only other possibility is not to make any progress. And it's kind of horrible that way, you know. It's not ideal, but I feel like a lot of us have been in situations like that ourselves.
Yeah,
have to deal with we're kind of forced to share space with we're kind of forced to rely on people who scare us or who are draining for us because it's like we don't have any other choice.
I think Nintendo's games tend to not experiment on that level, and so you get things that are like really expected or formulaic or like video gamey, like a cliche video gamey thing. It's sort of like the opposite of thinking outside the box. And it's like some of those games may be really well polished, but they're so predictable that there's a sense of wonder that gets taken away, or a sense of exploration that is a little mundane.
Only things that characters you really interact with and problematic are the crosses, and I think some other thing that resets when you touch it.
Yeah, I can't remember what that is, the thing that resets you. I think you're right though.
You're kind of you know, kind of caught between actively hostile people and maybe passively are not hostile but not particularly helpful either.
Sometimes like the goal area is like it's not clear how to find it or progress or to reach it, and the foreground and the background, sometimes you can't tell like what is the foreground, so when you just look at it, sometimes you can't parse like what the landscape really is just by looking at it. You have to kind of experiment with it a bit.
You might push into a wall and drop through the floor, and then, you know, from there warp up to the ceiling and then go over the ceiling and find yourself at the beginning again.
Yeah.
You really kind of lose your sense of space, I guess. Kind of like you lose control over yourself, I guess. In this environment where nothing can be understood for sure, not even yourself, really. The physicals will just working and everything's upside down.
And yeah, some areas like you like jump higher or like
way through where the gravity reverses.
Yeah. And like you said, like going off the screen and ending up like at the top or something, like that kind of thing.
It almost feels like hyper awareness. Like, you know, you can take a game where that has like a minimalistic system, like you have the floor, you have these objects, you have the end of the level, and everything's pretty clearly telegraphed and everything's very clearly marked. But even in that, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening that you aren't aware of, and this kind of maybe like in terms of like a rendering code and so on, this feels like the opposite of that. Like you're so aware of everything that it becomes completely disorienting. You work through that.
I think there's a lot of maybe game development that isn't creative enough regarding systems, algorithms, and design choices. There's a lot of formulaic kind of stuff.
I was talking to the author about something along the lines of that. That I think that she said that it was a game where the systems are made explicit instead of being hidden away. for granted stuff like, you know, the way that out of your jump, and that some blocks are solid, and that you can jump on stuff and you know, defeat enemies, and then that there will always be an exit or stuff like that. But you know, all that stuff is really designed. There's no reason that your jump height has to be convenient, or that, you know, a bridge has to magically appear when you walk up to it. And I think that by throwing all this stuff at you, that kind of subverts everything, kind of drives home just how much make things convenient for you in other games.
Yeah. That's kind of something that's kind of cool about like the speedrunning or like weird challenge playthrough stuff, is that like when you're not following what you're supposed to do, and just like sometimes using obscure mechanics and things to achieve something, it's like it's not convenient, and part of the excitement and the wonder is that you're like that you are subverting it, and that you're able to use those things in an interesting way to achieve something that feels like kind of groundbreaking, or sort of like
the ways in which the game seems broken that are the same ways in which it seems alive.
Yeah, it feels like it means something.
Oh, you know what, if you like that, you know what you would like? There's a game called Strawberry Cubes, and it's a game that's similar in that it almost seems deliberately broken. Move between rooms, and it's like this very dark black and red space, and you end up phasing through walls and surround, and you can actually enter into like a mode where you can mess with variables and stuff like that.
I've never heard of it.
It's on itch.
I designed a game, but it was I wanted a 1v1 game that was like really deep, but you like kind of had this sort of turn-based thing, and there's a huge number of possible moves, but that narrows down really quickly in like the space of what is a good move. It narrows down really fast. So there's like kind of like a metagame that's kind of mathematical in nature, I guess, that is sort of something like chess, and then what were you saying?
Say it seems like the kind of game a speedrunner would make.
Yeah, but it's very difficult to. I think it's very difficult to try to make it very deep without it. Like, if it's deep, that doesn't just mean like memorization of strategy or like I don't know. Like, it felt like it got too narrow or something. It's still a pretty deep game. It's like a deep game, but it doesn't have like the creative freedom of like, I don't know, making a Minecraft world or something, or like, I don't know, like it's limited in some ways. It's limited in some ways, and when you get good at the game, you kind of feel the limitations, like sort of feel the metagame of it. And I don't know where to go from there so much, because it's like a perfectly fine thing, but I mean, it feels like eventually you would just have a bot play it and try to win, and like it wouldn't be as fun to, like, I don't know, it feels like the future of it is just having a bot like figure it out really clearly, like what are the optimal strategies, which kind of kills the game, because then it's like these are the best ways to win, and then it sort of feels like ingenuity gets removed.
But I feel like any game could turn into that if you give it enough time.
Yeah, so it's like, how do you design something that sort of doesn't do that?
Pulling off 20XX, basically. You know, you look at something like the board game Go, and you know they're still having trouble figuring out how to get bots to play that, and it's been hundreds of years.
They got good bots playing it now, and I think that ends up going down the same path that my game goes down and that chess goes down. Well, kind of. My game, you kind of move simultaneously, so there's a bit of like you move simultaneously, so there's like probabilities, like what are they gonna do kind of thing going on. And you could say you could read the opponent, but you could also like probably mathematically calculate what are good moves by probability. But I guess it gets sort of meta then, because like if this is obviously the best move, but if they can counter it by knowing what it is, then it throws the whole thing into like a weird Yomi thing where it's like it becomes like a guessing game. And I don't know if that's where some depth is, but it's still ending up with probabilities. And if you play kind of randomly enough, like there's situations in my game where one of the best players of it opens up a random number generator and generates a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 1 or a 2 to make decisions as to which move to play, because just wants to mix things up with like certain probability. And
excuse me, I just need a few seconds to go grab my charger, because if I don't, this is gonna suddenly die.
Okay.
We're talking about your game?
Yeah. It's like, how much depth is there in having imperfect information where both players do something simultaneously, and sometimes there's like a clear best move, but because it's clearly the best, it's a high probability of being countered, and then I guess that gets played into it's just game theory shit, I guess. But I don't know, it feels like it sort of breaks down into this like cold mathematical thing that doesn't have like kindling magic of like being in control, I guess, because you could just mathematically, I think you could sort of just mathematically kind of solve it, and then that kind of kills, I feel like that kind of kills the wonder of it in some ways.
It's sort of like in I think in the first generation of Pokemon, wasn't like Mewtwo like objectively the best Pokemon choice?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like the only error would be like to use to buy 2 cartridges, right, and then use one of them to basically get a Mewtwo and then trade it over to the other cartridge, then reset.
Okay, well,
get another Mewtwo and trade that over.
To be fair though, I don't know the red, blue, yellow like metagame. If they like, if there is like a no holds barred like 6 Pokemon team where you could like, if you have a certain rule set for the battles, I don't know if 6 Mewtwo's is like really the path to victory. I don't know if that's true, but I get your point though. It's like you find an optimal thing, and then you just do that, and then that narrows the game significantly. So another example of that is like Melee. Is a good, you were mentioning that before. It's like if your goal is, yeah, if your goal is to win, you pick top tier. You don't pick bottom tier. You pick top tier, and that is the metagame. And so, you know, bad characters end up being less relevant.
Because I like Samus and Kirby, you know? But that doesn't help me much.
Right. So it's like you could fight with Samus and Kirby, and then realize Kirby is so shitty, and then pick only Samus in tournaments, and then have uphill battles with some characters, and then you're still picking like a suboptimal choice. Now Samus can still do stuff, but if it's like, it's sort of like a negotiation. It's like a negotiation between sort of finding what you personally like in the game, sort of an identity thing, and also trying to win at the game, which is like this cold, harsh mathematical truth thing, kind of.
I think in some cases it can get like really dark in some ways. Like I was playing Breath of the Wild and like the Trial of the Sword, and trying to find ways to raise up my health because, you know, you don't get any food. And I'd always, I think, known that you could make rock hard food out of trees.
Yeah.
But I never thought it would come in handy, because the first time I tried doing it only gave me like a quarter of a heart. So, but then I went into like that room 7, you know, the one where with the items and like the fish and the stuff. Mm-hmm. I cooked all the fish, and once I cooked all the fish, there were no more fish. So I got all the apples, and once I got all the apples, well, there are no more apples. So I chopped all the trees down, and once I had chopped down all the trees, I opened all the treasure chests. Once I had opened all the treasure chests, there was nothing left to do, so I cooked all the wood down and ate it. And then, no, I cooked down all the wood and turned it into rock hard food. And once I cooked all the wood, there was nothing there, and I was all alone. And you can imagine somebody to this room and finding it completely devoid of life, and you know, just hearing this sound of like crunching charcoal in the distance. There's like a screenshot of my food place, of like my food section filled with these rock hard foods, and it feels like I sort of like I've become a bot at this point.
Yeah, kinda. And it's like I did the same thing too. Like like I think someone brought up in my chat, like, you can cook the wood. I'm like, oh yeah, and then sure enough, you know, I'm like bombing every tree, getting every piece of wood, cooking every piece of wood. It's like, that's like, if you're trying to survive and have as much health as possible, that's optimal.
Right, there's like a screenshot of me as Dark Link in front of like a decimated forest.
Yeah.
Like I've become this monster because it feels like I'm starting to. It feels like it almost reveals the true nature of the game in a sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And that the sense that the whole world is just this one gigantic puzzle that you're supposed to solve, which I guess from a gameplay standard is quote unquote fun, but it's also kind of bleak.
Well, it's like the magic's gone now and you're going through the motions because you found the optimal thing to do. At least for a part of it. There's obviously a lot of different things, but if it's coming to like this health management thing in Trial of the Sword, then it's like, yeah, you're gonna want to get all that wood, and you know this, and so you do it, and you kind of go through the motions to like play optimally. And once you know it, it doesn't become novel anymore, and maybe it's good for some laughs when you're showing people, but it's like, you know what it is, you just know that this is a way to get another quarter heart per tree, so you do it, and yeah, you're just going through the motions.
I feel like you've reached that point with any game?
I mean, yeah. I mean, well, with speedrunning, the most illuminating example was the Ocarina of Time 1810 run, where after the run, I thought about the run and the speedrunning grind, and like, what does it mean to get a good time? So I'm optimizing for my final time, and there's kind of a negotiation with risk and reward and different strategies and whatnot, but that gets kind of sorted out, and so you have all your strats, and then there's all this kind of annoying human muscle memory. It's like training it and practicing these timings and everything, which is not particularly interesting. It's like, I'm good at games. It's like, why? Because I press buttons accurately, and it's like, well, that's not a very profound thing. That's just like sort of testing human reaction time, or like human like kind of a timing thing, and that just comes up against your biological limitations, and it doesn't require much thought really. It's just sort of executing this series of muscle movements that need to be timed well. So like sort of the magic of it goes away, and you just kind of face this biological reality, and the grind itself then becomes this sort of statistical game where as your time gets better, like it's harder and harder to improve it. So there's like diminishing returns. So as the time gets better, it just like there's more and more time investment required to play this sort of statistical lotto as you try to get the outlier run that you want to get the good time. And
you know, you never know. Oh yeah, no, go on.
Well, the diminishing returns fall off, and then it's like it's just a void. Then there's all the magic's gone. You're just grinding this thing and failing because you're human at pressing buttons and moving joysticks. And you know, it's like there's not much more you can really do to improve so much. It's sort of like you're sort of just like playing this waiting game and just like feeling the void of it. And it's just like this random outcomes sort of, and there's nothing meaningful in it really, and it kind of lost its meaning.
I think one thing that I will always love about the Kaizo Massacre kind of game is that like a perfect playthrough of that to get it right immediately would actually be less fun. Like dying is part of the fun. Like it's almost like it's a celebration of our fallibility, of our human fallibility. Like games like I Want to Be the Guy.
Oh yeah, so like something unexpected happens and you die and you're like, oh my god, and then you kind of learn about it and you proceed. It's like failing's part of the path to victory.
Kind of is almost there's almost like an intrinsic appeal to failure in those games.
Yeah.
On grind. I think I like the idea that a game can be meaningful even outside of metrics of mastery.
I mean, I think if you played those games long enough, though, it would kind of fall into the same kind of thing, because then failing would no longer like be novel, and it would just kind of end up very similar to speedrunning, the grind at the end. Once you do it enough with enough time, if your goal is mastery, like if you're trying to do these like no death runs or like, you know, speed runs or anything like that, it'll just kind of turn into that same void. So that's why I think I kind of like these streams, because like sharing thoughts is not the void, and
a puzzle that you can solve or a game you can master.
Yeah, it's more free, and whatever it is you're trying to, like, I don't know what I'm trying to optimize for right now. I guess I'm just trying to like kind of connect. So yeah.
One thing I noticed is that for Super Mario 64, once they got good times going on, they started doing stuff like no A presses, and once they got that done, they started doing BC challenges.
So
once they got that done, they started doing capless and coinless and so on.
That stuff is like finding new metagames to explore. You come up with some set of limitations, you kind of invent it, you impose it upon the game, and then the game imposes itself on your attempt to complete such a thing. And then once you have begun that journey, there is a lot of sort of innovation and discovery and like clever thinking and puzzles and strategies and things that are almost possible but not quite, or things that are barely possible. And those things are not known prior to setting off on that journey. So it's like a whole exploration thing that is not such a void. It's not that void, it's different.
It's always like creating new conditions, creating new possibilities.
Yeah.
Remarkable in this case how flexible this game has been in regards to those demands.
I came up with a thing for Breath of the Wild. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's the key items challenge, where all the inventory tabs except for key items have to be locked and never unlocked, which means that you can never obtain swords, shields, arrows, and bows, clothing, and meals and materials. You can never collect any of that, and the game becomes the goal is to get as much stuff as you can get, complete as many things as you can do under those conditions. So it's a similar imposing of a challenge and the sort of creation of a metagame on top of Breath of the Wild. And when I came up with it and then I started playing it, and I found that a lot of shrines and things could be completed, but one of the things that I wasn't sure about was obtaining the camera rune, which gives you access to the Hyrule Compendium, which means that you can now go on this photo taking journey where you have to take a photo of every weapon, every enemy, every all these different items and animals and stuff. And so you on this big journey. If you could get to the camera, you could go on this big journey to go and get all of these things. And one of the big things too is the Koroks, which some of them are possible and some of them seem impossible. And so there's this huge space where instead of the game where it's possible to do all these things, and where 100% completing Breath of the Wild sort of feels like going through the motions because you know that it is of trivial difficulty with enough time. Getting your file maxed out in the key items challenge is non-trivial and requires a lot of crazy things, such as flying the flying machine to the top of a mountain and breaking a crate and having the crate drop an apple that lands in the little pedestal to get a Korok to pop out. So there's a lot of stuff that is very difficult or challenging to progress to a totally completed file, or at least as far completed as you can go, and then you can make lists of what is not accomplished yet and how possible it is, if it's completely ruled out or not. It's similar to the A button challenge where you're trying to optimize for reducing the amount of A presses, except this you're trying to maximize the amount of things you can accomplish under the set of conditions. And I have not gotten super far into it, but it turned out that you could get the camera, and the way we did it, which there might be a faster way to do this, but now the way we did it was on the entire other side of the map, way to the north. There's another blue fire area, and you can't light the blue fire because you can't pick up a weapon to light it, but enemies can pick up weapons. But enemies' weapons, the moblins that are near it, they can light it by swinging their clubs and stuff into it, but the clubs burn when they're on fire. And it turns out there's one item in the game that doesn't burn that doesn't burn away when it's on fire, and that's the torch. The torch stays lit forever, but there's no torch nearby. The nearest free torch that is movable is way far away, near Zora's Domain kind of. So what we did was we went to Hyrule Castle and we used the flying machine with the minecart to fly over to the torch, push the torch into the river, then pick it up with the minecart and carry it all the way to Akala, carrying it with the minecart, then dropping the torch in front of the moblin, having the moblin swing their original weapons and have it catch on fire until it burns, luring the moblin to pick up the torch, and then making the moblin swing at the blue fire to light it blue. And now you have a lit blue torch, and you can kill the moblin to have it drop it, and then carefully push it into the minecart. And now you have a lit blue torch in your minecart, but you're all the way up in Akala, and you have to go to Hiteno, which is like way across the map, and you can't teleport or anything, and if you die, it resets, and you don't have any of the stuff anymore, and you have to start over. And if the torch goes out, you're really screwed. And the torch will go out when it rains, so there's weather patterns. And during the daytime when the sun is shining, there can be sun showers at random that will put out the torch. And there's randomly generated weather. And there's also region changes where the weather suddenly abruptly changes. And sometimes it can abruptly change to rain. And the rain will put out the torch and make you lose. And so it was like many strategies were discovered on this long treacherous road to take the blue fire lit torch all the way across the map and navigate the rainfall, and like hiding under shelter and like staying in stables and like trying to pass time by camping at fires, which all keep the torch lit. And there's like risky moments where you hold your breath and you don't know if like the region change is gonna flip out, or if sun showers are gonna happen at random and ruin the journey. And eventually it was discovered that if it's cloudy, the sun showers never happen. So when it's cloudy, you're actually safe. And so you can re-roll for good weather patterns by staying in a safe place where the rain won't hit you, and then staying at a campfire repeatedly until you roll all clouds as the weather. And that gives you time to move. But you also don't want to move during the night, because night monsters attack you, and they can pick up the torch out of the minecart, and like wolves attack you. And also there was like fauna, or there's fauna, like little birds and stuff, like little blue birds and like insects. And those things, as you're carrying the minecart with magnesis, those things could run into the minecart and tip it over, which would cause the torch to fall out. And then once the torch is out, you can't get it back in unless you find very specific geometry to push it back into the minecart. So this huge journey across the map, avoiding the weather, avoiding the night monsters, and being very careful and making sure the fauna doesn't get you and like wolves attacking you and stuff. All of that after bringing that torch all the way from the Hyrule Castle minecart, bringing it all the way up to Akala, doing this moblin thing and like hiding from the weather and doing all this thing, finally all the way to Hiteno to light it, unlock the camera, and it was unlocked. And now the Hyrule Compendium quest unlocks, and there suddenly becomes a huge new objective to go take pictures of everything. And some things will disappear forever if you don't get them, like if you kill too many enemies. The enemies will level up, and some items that they hold, like the Lionel sword, will never be obtainable again, and you need to take a photo of it. So that means you have to kill Lionels, and like the Lionels have a lot of HP and you don't have weapons, but there's like a camera manipulation trick to get the Lionel to continue to run towards the top of the screen, and you keep moving the camera so the Lionel never stops running. It runs around Link forever, and you slowly throw bombs or summon Wolf Link with an amiibo to slowly whittle down the Lionel so you can take the photo. And that's just like a bit of the key items challenge, and it's been really interesting and invigorating. And that's just something I've been doing with Breath of the Wild. I don't think that many people know about this, but it's been really interesting.
Lord, Kitana would smile at that.
Yeah, so I should probably play that more. It's really good.
I feel like the end point of all of this, I think about people sharing screenshots online, or recording free running videos, stuff like that gives opportunities for play but isn't really masterable because the metric is beauty.
Yeah, like that challenge, like the whole journey and everything, like none of it's like intended, and it's using these interesting game mechanics that we didn't even know about, like the sun showers and everything, and the clouds, and like there's so much unexpected like emergent gameplay, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing, and like that was just kind of something that came up in the midst of like figuring this stuff out, and it was just that beautiful thing, that thing that I guess I have passion for, that thing that made it interesting for me to get into speedrunning in the first place. Not the void and not the repetition, but like just the exciting realizations that some things may be possible, and the absurdity of the challenge and accomplishing it for the first time.
One must imagine Narcissa happy about this, what was Sisyphus, as you said that?
Oh, what?
Sisyphus, the boulder, rolling the boulder up the hill.
Yeah, that's kind of like speedrunning.
So you've been speedrunning. You were speedrunning Ocarina of Time for a while. What did it feel like when it was still like new, when you were still starting to speedrun things?
I saw like TSA's runs forever ago, like the sub 5 hour run, which is cool because I love that game, and I was like, cool. But then in 2006, like they started to break the game, and it got damn fucking exciting. I just like fell in love with it, which prompted me to like really want to get into it more, so I did. And I first contributed in 2007 with the Force Escape, and then just like all the different things that were discovered, like Dora Time Skip. And another thing that really interested me about Ocarina of Time was the bottle adventure glitch, and I like went through and kind of charted out like every single possible thing you could do with it, because it's this crazy memory manipulation glitch, and like I didn't know what the limits of it were, and so I wanted to like discover the limitations and see like if there was anything more you could do with it. So I got really into that, and then more and more stuff kept getting found, so eventually we started speedrunning it.
Like memory manipulation is always fun.
Yeah, it was like kind of mind-blowing because like it started to make sense to me, like how it worked, and like just understanding it deeply felt really satisfying, and like tinkering with it.
Really does feel like we kind of help to make these games as we interpret them and change the ways in which we're expected to play them. Like if you take something like Smash Melee, the way it was played back when it was new is completely different from the way it's played now, and that kind of changes the way the game is perceived and what how people understand what it is. I guess the same thing can be said for Super Mario 64, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
then versus
both of those,
where the game is constantly being made through its analysis.
I haven't seen much new like Melee things. Like there was a lot though, between like mostly just the multiplayer, but there was other stuff like home run contests, break the targets, one player mode stuff, and then not just like trying to optimize for tournament gameplay with just like a small cast of top tiers, but then like exploring like every matchup, like all these different matchups, like mid tiers, low tiers, and everything, and like trying to learn how to master those things and play well and like get a feel for these things. And it's like kind of deep and skillful game that can be pushed really far, but I haven't seen much new many new things from Melee in a while, and I feel like I don't have too much desire to play it as much now, I guess, but I respect it though.
Reading about the records about how these things get found, it really feels like you're reading kind of a story or a history in itself.
Yeah, you know, it's like alluring somehow.
There's lore to it.
Yeah.
Important moments and stuff like that.
I'm glad I got to talk about the key items thing. I think I told that pretty well. This whole conversation's been pretty interesting.
Interesting getting to talk to you at long last.
Yeah, yeah. This like really went into like the whole, like a lot of what makes that whole metagaming thing interesting, and the kind of the beauty of it, and like games and their emergent gameplay, like evolving and creating new meaning and things like that. It's like a pretty deep conversation, and like the limitations of speedrunning and the predictability of some mainstream games and everything. Like we went through a lot of different things that like it was pretty good. So it's like cool. It's gonna be recorded, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.